Gopijana Vallabha Givaradhari Yashodanandana Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Iskandiviti founder Acharya Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Prem se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gata Gopinath Shanakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki Shri Vrindavan Dhana ki, Shri Dwarka Dhana ki, Shri Jagannath Puri Dhana ki, Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dhana ki, Shri Mayapur Chandradan Mandir ki, Ganga Mari Gunamari ki, Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi ki, Harinama Sankirtan ki, Samavata Bhakta Vrinda ki, Shri Accidental Book Distribution ki, Jai Shri Shri Bhagavatam ki, Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra ki, Jai Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Jai Shri Guru Govardhan ki, Jai Shri Radha Mohan ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru to Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Why is it going on here? Om Ajnanatirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurindritam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदं सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपीशा गोपिका कान्ता नमोस्तुते सप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते नमामि हरिप्रिये पञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः
नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये नष्टप्रायसभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भागवते उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय
ओम श्री सरभ्याय नमः
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 मुखं करोति वाचरं पापुर्लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दिनतारम् यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे Kadasi for the very special day.
No cooking in the morning also.
So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 3.3, Canto number 1, chapter 3, entitled Krishna is the source of all incarnations. Text number 33. Yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad brahma-darśanam yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad-brahma-darśanam yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad-brahma-darśanam yatreme sad-asad-rūpe yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad-brahma-darśanam
yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad-brahma-darśanam
yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad-brahma-darśanam yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad-brahma-darśanam
yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad-brahma-darśanam
Ladies.
yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad-brahma-darśanam yatreme sad-asad-rūpe pratiṣiddhe sva-saṁvidā avidyayātmani kṛte iti tad-brahma-darśanam
Yatra, whenever, ime, in all these, sat-asat, gross and subtle, rūpe, in the forms of pratiṣiddhe, on being nullified, sva-saṁvidā, by self-realization, avidyayā, by ignorance, ātmani, in the self, kṛte, having been imposed, iti, thus, tat, that is, brahma-darśanam, the process of seeing the Absolute. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Whenever a person experiences by self-realization that both the gross and subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as well as the Lord. Kindly repeat after me. Whenever a person experiences
Whenever the person experiences
by self-realization
by self-realization
that both the gross
that both the gross
and subtle bodies
and subtle bodies
have nothing to do
have nothing to do
with the pure self,
with the pure self,
at that time
at that time
he sees himself
he sees himself
as well as the Lord.
as well as the Lord.
Purport. The difference between self-realization and material illusion is to know that the temporary or illusory impositions of material energy in the shape of gross and subtle bodies are superficial coverings of the self. The coverings take place due to ignorance. Such coverings are never effective in the person of the personality of Godhead. Knowing this convincingly is called liberation, or seeing the Absolute. This means that perfect self-realization is made possible by adoption of godly or spiritual life. Self-realization means becoming indifferent to the needs of the gross and subtle bodies and becoming serious about the activities of the self. The impetus for activities is generated from the self, but such activities become illusory due to ignorance of the real position of the self. By ignorance, self-interest is calculated in terms of the gross and subtle bodies, and therefore a whole set of activities is spoiled, life after life. When, however, one meets the self by proper culture, the activities of the self begin. Therefore, a man who is engaged in the activities of the self is called Jivan Mukta, or a liberated person, even in the conditional existence. This perfect stage of self-realization is attained not by artificial means, but under the lotus feet of the Lord, who is always transcendental. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that He is present in everyone's heart, and from Him only all knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness take place. When the living being desires to be an enjoyer of material energy, illusory phenomena, the Lord covers the living being in the mystery of forgetfulness. And thus, the living being misinterprets the gross body and subtle mind to be his own self. By the culture of transcendental knowledge, when the living being prays to the Lord for deliverance from the clutches of forgetfulness, the Lord, by His causeless mercy, removes the living being's illusory curtain, and thus he realizes his own self. He then engages himself in the service of the Lord in his eternal constitutional position, becoming liberated from the conditioned life. All this is executed by the Lord either through His external potency or directly by the internal potency. Just reading the verse again. Whenever a person experiences by self-realization that both the gross and subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as well as the Lord. So this verse is speaking about brahma-darśanam, how to actually become self-realized. A number of interesting statements in the purport. One of them that kind of we don't hear so much, the mystery of forgetfulness. Living entities are in this material world having forgotten their identity, having forgotten their relationship with the Lord, and that in itself is not so easy to understand. Mystery of forgetfulness. Some years back, within our ISKCON society, there was a major debate that took on the name the origin of the spirit soul. From where and when did the spirit soul become entangled in this material world, which brought about this forgetfulness. And the debate went on for a long time, and actually was quite an involved debate, which divided, because there were strong opinions with various kinds of shastric references also on both sides. Of course, ISKCON's position, as often explained by Srila Prabhupada, was that somehow or other means in some mysterious way the living entity has come in contact with this material energy, and we cannot actually trace out when this happened. We cannot understand exactly, except that at one point, that's a further explanation by our acharyas, due to our minute independence, due to misusing our minute independence, we have acted in such a way that we have disqualified ourselves from being in the company or in the presence of the Lord. In other words, we have in some way offended the Lord. I often make this reference in terms of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, something I had read quite some time back, that the greatest offense of all the living entities, the greatest offense we have committed is to have forgotten Krishna, or refused to engage in his service. Not so easy to understand. Of course, that question comes up all the time. If we were with Krishna, how is it? I mean, how is it possible that we could leave his association? And now we have to work so hard. So many lifetimes we have to struggle to go back to the spiritual world, but it's going to happen again. Then why struggle so hard if I'm again going to misuse my independence? So again, of course, our acharyas have an explanation whereby they they explain how it's just like if someone makes a very bad mistake, like a child burns his hand, he will not again, at least voluntarily, put his hand in the fire. So in a similar way, we are, Krishna actually promises in the Bhagavad Gita that once having returned to the spiritual world, we will never again come back in this material world. So we should take a shelter of those instructions and positively and enthusiastically engage in this process of spiritual life, specifically in devotional service. And of course, in the purport, it explains how it is only by the mercy of the Lord, only by the Lord's mercy, that we will again regain our original God consciousness or Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada is also very, we could say, encouraging by explaining in the purport how as soon as one takes up the process, even though one may still be or will still be in the conditional stage of life, one is considered mukta jiv, liberated person. That may not immediately be easy to understand. How can we be a liberated person? Seems contradictory if we're still conditioned. We are still conditioned, we may still be conditioned, but we have taken up the process that will, if we continue that process, that will actually liberate us. So that's nicely explained also by Srila Rupa Goswami. Anyone who takes up for whatever period of time, one may not continue. Sometimes it happens. Or one may not be immediately successful. But the very fact that one takes up spiritual life he is on the path of liberation. He's on the path of liberation, which means that he's considered liberated. And as one continues to practice, to follow in the footsteps of the Mahajans, Mahajana Jena Gatasa Pantaha, then one will hear one of the main instructions, rise above the bodily identification, both gross and subtle, isn't it? The gross body and the subtle body are what are keeping us in this material world, our identification with both the gross and subtle body. And so this brahma-darśanam, this full, complete level of self-realization will come when we are no longer on the gross or subtle bodily platform. And we were just discussing in the last few days how that happens as one takes up the process of bhakti or devotional service. And although externally we are here in the material world, externally we have this gross body and this subtle mind, but by the constant and more, there has to be a quality to that constance also. That quality means we must intensify our consciousness in performing these activities. So not only we should be engaged in devotional service, but we should be concerned about the quality of that service, the level of consciousness in which we perform our activities, isn't it? So that will gradually purify both the gross and subtle body. And we have examples, of course, in our sampradaya. We read the lives of personalities like Shyamananda, Pandit Narottam Das Thakur. They had never met actually Lord Chaitanya. They appeared around the same time, at that same time, but never actually met, not physically met with Lord Chaitanya. But because at that time the activities of Lord Chaitanya were spread all over Bengal and Orissa, and it was like the most important, we could say, major event taking place. So many people were becoming Vaishnavas, and naturally they came to know, they associated actually with many devotees who were closely connected with Lord Chaitanya. They associated with the Goswamis, some of the Goswamis in Vrindavan, and they, as we know, they became very exalted personalities, and they, although still living in their so-called ordinary body, they were, that's how it's nicely described, they were simultaneously awakened to their, what is called swarup siddhi. Brahma-darśanam means when we come to that level or platform of developing our original spiritual consciousness in terms of our natural and eternal relationship with Krishna. These are, of course, are very very high levels, but we should know that this is a part of the goal in practicing Krishna consciousness. That is also, very much detailed by our Goswamis, especially Srila Rupa Goswami explains in the Nectar Devotion the 9 levels of bhakti. The 2 last levels being the level of bhava bhakti and prema bhakti. So it is at bhava bhakti where one can actually have this brahma-darśanam, where one can, again, by the mercy, and only by the mercy of Krishna, one's relationship with the Lord is actually revealed at that time. So there are so many levels. The first level is to at least theoretically understand that we are a spirit in nature, aham brahmasmi, and then it goes up to different levels of consciousness. So this is a little bit what is being explained here. It is possible by 2 things. It is possible to attain these higher levels of consciousness, these higher levels of self-realization, by 2 things. One is by the, we could say, attentive application, isn't it? By applying the process that is prescribed by our acharyas, that is described also by Krishna. Man mana bhava madhapaktu mam yatimam namaskuru. To become the Lord's devotee, think of Him, offer obeisances to Him. By following the process, recommended process. And then the second thing that is needed is actually the mercy of the Lord. Prabhupada makes reference, of course, in the purport also regarding the presence of the Lord within everyone's heart. Sarvasachaham ridi sanivisto matasmitir jnanam apohanam cha. The Lord is seated in everyone's heart, and He is the one who awards remembrance and forgetfulness. So if we have a strong desire to remember Krishna and to engage in His devotional service and to reawaken our lost relationship with Him, then Krishna will understand, because He's every second of the day reading our mind. So we have to be careful. Just imagine if you know that somebody is reading your mind. That is part of the mystery of forgetfulness. If we knew this all the time, then we would immediately become pure devotees. But that is part of, Krishna awards us that forgetfulness. He makes us forget that He's always knowing what we are thinking about. That's why He is like the eternal witness. He knows our most inner thoughts and desires. He knows our most inner secrets. Wow. Even something you've never told to anyone, Krishna knows about it. Can't hide anything. Cannot hide anything from Krishna. But we don't think about that. We forget about that. Of course, most people don't even know about it because they've never opened the Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. It's there in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. And that's why, even as devotees, because our tendency is to forget in our conditional stage, we have to attend Bhagavatam class on a daily basis. We have to hear on a regular basis to be reminded, oh yeah, it's like that. So this is, when we know about this system, this process, and this possibility, oh, see, this is called, normally when I want to find out the time, I look at the purport, because the purport is on my screen at the computer, but it's not there now. It's called conditioning. Any comments or questions on this? It must be close to 9 o'clock. I don't know. What time is it?
Yes, 9:05.
Yeah. See,
This is possible only through one of a spiritual master. You cannot directly go to.
it's definitely not possible through a non-bona fide spiritual master. Yes, one receives the mercy of Krishna through the bona fide spiritual master. One can directly receive from Krishna, but the general process is that we approach Krishna and we receive the favorable glance of Krishna, just like we hear how the most exalted of all devotees, Srimati Radharani, she will, when she sees that devotee is nicely engaged, she will recommend to Krishna, Krishna, look at him, give him some mercy. So that is, that is part of the process, very important part of the process that we chant every day, isn't it? Yasha prasadad bhagavata prasado, yasha prasadam nabati kutopi. That by the mercy of Krishna we get Guru, and then by the mercy of Guru we get Krishna. That's another mystery. So Krishna has arranged this system or this process that by serving the Guru Parampara, isn't it? As a matter of fact, that's a very important prayer composed by Srila Rupa Goswami, isn't it? Whereby he prays to Lord Chaitanya, please allow me to know your inner mind and desires. In other words, the disciple should always be endeavoring to understand the inner desires of the spiritual master, because it should be understood that the spiritual master is engaged in the Lord's mission, and he is the confidential servant of the Lord. Ultimately, we're all meant to become confidential servants Confidential servant simply means that we know what the Lord wants. We know what is the mission of the Lord. So in the early stage of practicing spiritual life, we don't know these things. We don't understand them that clearly. We may have some idea, but they are understood. The Lord's mission, the Lord's desires are understood naturally by those devotees who have, we could say, a higher level of realization. So our acharyas, they are, for us, the example of personalities whom we should follow, and that comes down in the process of guru-disciple. Yeah. So the more we serve the mission of the spiritual master, in our case within ISKCON, although we have different spiritual masters, we have many senior Vaishnavas who are who have taken that responsibility or that service of being as spiritual masters. We have a very unique situation in ISKCON, in that as Srila Prabhupada being the founder Acharya, he automatically, by being the founder Acharya, and by being the, we could say, inspirational force for anyone who's connected with the Hare Krishna movement, with ISKCON, therefore he is automatically the Shiksha Guru for everyone within ISKCON. And anyone who's a spiritual master within ISKCON is taking inspiration from Srila Prabhupada, and any devotee as well. Of course, we can and we should take inspiration from many different Vaishnavas, because the mission of the Lord is a very big mission, so there are many activities, many aspects to that mission, and according to our different natures, we may be more inclined or more attracted to serving in some particular way, isn't it? Which is fine, because we're all having our separate identity or individuality as well. But the principle is that, yeah, we serve faithfully under the guidance of the spiritual master. So that means that in this case, in ISKCON, we have two, we could say, two main spiritual masters, our Diksha Guru, and then Srila Prabhupada as the Shiksha Guru for all the members of ISKCON. And we may have other devotees, other Vaishnavas as well, who inspire us. We hear lectures from, etc. like that. That's all right.
Some are watching online on Facebook, so some are asking questions.
Yeah.
Governor Prabhu is asking, are Paramatma and your Diksha spiritual master observes on same level, and one performs the function of the other, or who is more important? Or are both equal?
Now, Paramatma is non-different from the Lord. And he is, as we mentioned a little earlier, monitoring everything. The spiritual master, he is a humble servant of that Paramatma. He is also, we could say, on another level, of course, very much responsible and involved with his disciples, to the extent that they are also involved with him, just like Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, according to how one surrenders, ye yatam mam prapadyanti tams tataiva bhajami aham. I will reciprocate accordingly. So the spiritual master is different from Paramatma. We hear in Bhagavatam how Paramatma is Krishna, is not different from Krishna, is an expansion of Krishna. And so Srila Prabhupada explains nicely how Krishna, or Paramatma, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, either in his original form as Krishna or expansion as Paramatma. Whereas the spiritual master, he is the Supreme Personality of Servitor Godhead, isn't it? So he's not, well, we could say in one sense, he's in the heart of his disciple in that he is a well-wisher of his disciple, but he's not physically like Krishna is in his form as Paramatma in the heart, and writing down all the things you think about or all your activities. Paramatma can do that. The spiritual master, he may know certain things, even though someone is far away, like in Las Vegas or something, but he is different, obviously. Spiritual master, he is jiva. We say ordinary jiva. Of course, anyone who becomes a devotee is no longer ordinary in the sense that he has, as we read in the purport, he's become like jivan mukta, liberated soul, on the way of totally becoming liberated. So the spiritual master remains the well-wisher, but he is not Krishna, he's not God, not Paramatma. Any other? Yes? It's not a question. Okay, we take non-questions also.
Many years ago, I was listening to your lecture.
You were listening to a lecture on the Bhagavatam.
Yes. So they were talking about the flaw of forgetfulness.
About forgetfulness, yeah.
So it was like that Prabhuji would generally give us. Do you remember what prasadam you took last time or yesterday and what you were doing? And I think, yeah, how forgetful we people are. Because generally we were not able to recall what we had been doing at that particular hour yesterday.
Yeah.
Or what prasadam we had taken. But then now I realize that forgetfulness is just at that level. It's so deep rooted. Like we have forgotten our sambandha with Allah.
Yeah.
It's not so like flimsy. Like whatever, like it's not so light. It goes much deeper.
Yeah. It's a serious forgetfulness.
Yes. So how do we really understand that severity? Okay, now I have come to know it's much deeper than what I thought. And now my doubt is, have I really understood how serious it is?
Yeah. Well, it's like a patient going to see a doctor, and he may not realize how serious his disease is. That's our position. Actually, we have a very serious condition. We have a chronic condition, all of us. But we're not aware of it. So it's also connected with this expression that Prabhupada is using here in the purport, this mystery of forgetfulness. The mystery of forgetfulness goes back to when it actually happened. When did we do this? When did we commit this blunder of forgetting Krishna and coming in this material world? That's one level of forgetfulness, or one stage, the beginning stage. And then that forgetfulness, that mystery continues in the sense that, as you just mentioned, um, we don't, even after becoming devotees, we don't understand how deep and how complex, we could say, and how conditioning, how heavily conditioning that forgetfulness is. And therefore we need to follow the process so that gradually we can only understand more of that, we could say, mystery, or we can begin to unravel that mystery, to solve that mystery, to the extent that we become more advanced, more self-realized. So Prabhupada uses the word serious. The more serious we are in practicing Krishna consciousness, so that we are reminding ourselves all the time that by applying nicely the process, then we will gradually regain our original position as Krishna's eternal servants, and we will demonstrate that in our talking, in our thinking, in our activities, and we will totally become again, absorbed in our nature as eternal servants, and in due course of time, we will, by the mercy of Krishna, come to know our actual relationship with Krishna. I mean, it's a big step to begin with to understand that we are servants of Krishna. But there's more to that, isn't it? There are higher levels. What is my actual service to Krishna? What is my actual identity to Krishna? So these things come in due course of time, in the same way that when someone has a very serious or chronic disease, generally if somebody has a chronic disease, there's no cure. We have a chronic disease, but there's a cure for all of us, and is by taking up the process of Krishna consciousness seriously, by following all the prescribed recommendations given by our acharyas. So gradually, again, because it's such a severe kind of disease that we have, it is only by Krishna's mercy that it can become resolved or cured. Yeah. Yes.
Also the everyday.
Yes.
We were reading how merciful the Lord is, especially when there's a dialogue between Chaturkumaras and the Lord after they have placed their
Third canto.
third canto.
Okay.
So every time we read this writing, he is so merciful, and still how bad I would have been.
We read about how the Lord is so very merciful, and still we are.
I mean, that means we have to be so much bad.
And still we are forgetting, and still we are not becoming as serious as we should be in Krishna consciousness. Yes, that is that is the seriousness of our disease. We are hearing, we are following, and still, because our disease is very severe and has been with us since such a long time, it takes some time. We should not be discouraged. We should know as Prabhupada reminds us so many times in so many places, how the quality of our activities, the quality of our service needs to increase. We need to increase the quality of what we are doing. We need to increase our level of consciousness in everything that we are doing. And that means we have to, one of the qualities a devotee must have, must be very determined, must continue to be, as Rupa Goswami explains in the nectar of instruction, isn't it? To be patient and to be tolerant in executing our practice of devotional service. We allow ourselves to be still influenced by our unbridled mind very often, and therefore we become at different times slack in our application of the process of Krishna consciousness. So therefore, we have to check all the time and be cautious. And the more we endeavor in this way, then Krishna will help us to make progress, to gain different realizations, which will make us more steady and stronger in our Krishna consciousness. So I think we need to bring this to an end. Jai Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai.